All right, welcome everybody to our weekly HCI Local Chapters live stream show. I'm your host, Tom Wilk, and the show is brought to you by Robert Half, who is a talent solutions firm and a leading provider of technology professionals needed to build, deploy, and operate technology in this cloud and digital world. And they do that by placing highly skilled IT professionals either on a contract, a project, or a full-time permanent basis. And they can help you keep your business going. Now you can browse available candidates, you can search for jobs, and you can access additional valuable information on hiring and career sites by going to roberthalf.com/technology. All right, so let's get into the show. Our guest today is Justin Robbins. Once a 12-year-old, this is interesting, once you're a 12-year-old call center agent, Justin has a career that spans over 2 decades and has taken him through the customer experience ranks. He's led global training and consulting teams. He's built original industry research programs, and he's directed technology marketing strategies. And this is a cool thing we were talking about pre-show, was presented around the world as a keynote speaker and a workshop facilitator. A lot I got to learn from this guy. But today, Justin leads the education and marketing programs at CX Effect, an organization that connects business leaders with CX advisors to help them reimagine and transform their customer experience outcomes, something we all need to learn from. On a personal note, Justin lives with his wife and 4 kids in Wilmington, North Carolina, and can frequently be found spending his weekends cooking barbecue, and as we talked about pre-show, serving as a professional barbecue judge. Justin, it is an honor and privilege to have you on our show tonight. So welcome to our show.
Tom, thanks for having me. It is a blast to be here. As we were talking, as we were leading up to this, there've been a whole bunch of friends and people I have a ton of respect for that have, you've had as guests, and yeah, excited for what we're going to talk about tonight.
I tell you what, just like you and I talked about conferences, like this show has introduced me to some wonderful, great people. So I'm glad to know you. And now that we've talked pre-show, I get to see you in September and November at a couple of conferences. So that's
I'm excited for that. Yeah, it's
so
good.
Your expertise, as we've been talking, is customer experience. I mean, you're chief evangelist of CX Effect customer experience. So as a frontline manager, and I can imagine some of my folks going, so what does it matter to me about customer experience? Why should I care?
That's your question for me?
Yeah. Why would someone? Why is it important? I mean, I know I'm setting you up here. It's like a softball for you, but I do hear this. Believe it or not, I've heard, depending on where you work and what your field is, some of the people are like, I really don't care about the customer experience. I'm just here to do my job.
Yeah, I don't believe they started that way, Tom. And here's what I want to pull from. So you mentioned the 12-year-old contact center agent thing, which is a true story. I grew through the ranks, spent a bunch of time as a supervisor and a manager. But going back from about 2012 to 2017, I had the opportunity every year to do a bunch of research projects. And one of the things I always made time for was interviewing a few thousand frontline customer experience professionals, and whether they were support agents on the phone or supervisors of those people. And I wanted to understand, why would they choose this line of work? What did they care about? What did they not care about? What did they get frustrated by? All of those types of things. And the common denominator across, easily 10,000 plus people that I spoke to is that they genuinely wanted to help people. And so when you say, why should I care about customer experience? I think the real question for somebody is, why did they stop caring? Because they got into that line of work for some reason, and more often than not, part of it was being wired to want to help people. So I think the real question we have to ask ourselves is, why do people stop caring about the customer experience? Why do people feel like they are not empowered to actually deliver great experiences? Right? Those are the real problems. And those are why people say, why should I care? The real reason they're asking that is because you've made it impossible for me from a process standpoint, or my systems are too complicated, or anytime I try to do something to help, you just shoot it down or don't act on it anyway. So why should I care? Well, that to me, I think, is the real driver behind it, Tom.
And this is why I like having you on the show, because we like to hear not only from you helping people in the field get the knowledge, but helping the leaders and business leaders and managers to understand like why their people may be frustrated. And maybe a different question to ask this, and I know we didn't talk about this, but maybe a different question is to say, is there a difference between customer service and customer experience?
Yes, there's a difference. I wrote a blog on this again after. So I love actual data. I'm a fan of telling stories, and I'm a fan of anecdotes, but I'm even a bigger fan of when I can give an evidence-based statement. So earlier this year, I asked a bunch of people how they define customer service, customer experience, customer success, things along those lines. And customer experience, Annette Franz, who's the former president of the Customer Experience Professional Association. So customer experience is this: it's the sum of all interactions a customer has with a brand and how they feel about those interactions, right? That's very broad and encompasses all sorts of functions. Customer service is a function within that. So customers and customer service often has to happen at what are the peak points in a customer's journey, right? They're interacting with customer service because they're making a new purchase, or because they have a question, or because something went wrong. And so those interactions can have a big influence on the entire customer experience.
Yeah. It's funny because I've been doing more research, and I listened to I was watching a webinar earlier today, and it was talking about companies think they're 80% successful at customer experience, and then they did the survey with the customers. Like, I get 60% satisfaction of customer experience from companies. So it was like there's a disconnect there from organizations thinking they're delivering customer experience when it's probably customer service, and not really focusing on the entire experience. I love how you tell us that. So can you share with us like some of the way, key things that you can measure success? How do you measure, being successful at the customer experience?
Yeah. So again, customer experience is really broad. And I think the first thing for people listening to this is to focus in on number one. When you think about your organization's overall customer service mission or vision statement, or whatever they've put out at a kind of corporate level of, this is what we're about, this is why we're serving customers. One of the easiest things to do is make it feel extremely general and in no way relevant to the day-to-day work that you and your team do. And that is one of the first and biggest mistakes that businesses make. So first thing to understand what you should measure and what's important is quantify it for your business. So if you're leading the support team, what are the things that your support team can do on a daily basis can help you move towards fulfilling that mission? If you're running a customer service contact center, right? Those types of things. So number one is identify tangible, identifiable behaviors that are attributes, right, of that mission. The way I actually break it down, and Tom, I think we've talked a little bit about this, are behaviors that are, or even metrics that are predictive of success versus looking at things that are reflective of success. So if we think about how we measure customer experience or customer service or any interactions that our customers have with our business, most of what we look at are things that happen after the fact. What was the ticket, the time till the ticket was closed? What was the number of contacts that they had to make? What was the rating that they gave us? Right, all after the fact things. So when I come down to this idea of focusing ourselves as leaders, or even if you're a frontline employee, what are the things that you can do that if you do that, it is predictive of that outcome, of that, shorter resolution time, of that higher satisfaction rate. That's the frame of mind that I try to get people into, is thinking about what if you do this now, it will probably lead to a better outcome later.
And I know you said you like to tell stories, and we love that's a good way to get people, get through to people. So I'm going to make you tell the story you did to me earlier about predictive versus reflective with your barbecue. You were just talking about making your barbecue and how you tried to be predictive instead of reflective.
Yeah. So last weekend I made a brisket. This weekend I'm making a pork shoulder, and I want to talk about the brisket because that's just a beast. So if you've never cooked brisket, what's important to know about brisket is it comes from a chest muscle in the cow. It is one of the toughest pieces of beef that you can cook. And to get it right, it takes a lot of patience and a lot of preparation. A great brisket, a reflective measure of whether or not I got it right, is after, the cook time, I slice it open. Is it juicy? Is it soft, or does it seem chewy? Do people taste it? How do they, right? All of these things are after the fact. My preparation, my predictive measures of success for that brisket actually started 2 days before I got to that point, right? I looked at how much does that brisket weigh, and based off of that weight, I made a decision about how much time I thought it would take to cook. I made that decision of how much time it would take to cook based off of the temperature that I chose to cook it at. And I know that a temperature of about 225 degrees is going to get me a better result than a temperature of 300 degrees, right? But 225 degrees takes more time than 300 degrees. I also know that I could put any number of rubs on the brisket, right? I also knew that the type of wood that I put in there would create a flavor profile. If I rub that thing in just chili powder and used poison oak to smoke it, right? Those would not be good predictive measures. Right. But I know based off of doing brisket a bunch of times, right. And looking at the reflective measure, right. I know that it's about 50-50 salt and pepper. I know that it's about post oak. Right. Those are things I've learned. And every single one of us as leaders, we've probably got a pretty good sense of what are the predictive measures to get us to where we need to go. We just get so sucked up in the whirlwind of the day that we're only looking at things after the fact versus spending time on things that are strategic and ultimately predictive of our success.
Yeah, and I so what I'm hearing is like, and I agree with this, like we could even use our reflective outcome, to start building predictive models so that we, because we know that this happened and wasn't what we wanted. So why did that? What caused that? And I think that's what you and I were talking about, like better indicators of what we can use for the future, and how and so does this kind of flow into like driving sustainable change in what we do, and
Yeah. So you highlight the point of root cause analysis. Yep. I mean, that's right. And it's one of those things that's like, we all know to do it. We just somehow manage to get into a place where we don't do it. Right. And that's our own fault. Right. So that's part of all of us, a reminder like, hey, it's the little things. Sustainable performance improvement to me, Tom, though, is about being really, really good at focus and really, really intentional about where we invest development time. Right. Choosing priorities. Right. And not saying that I would often ask my team, what is the one thing that has to win today? Right. In every moment, like, what is the one thing that has to win, and how will we know it when we see it, right? How will we know that we've achieved the win? How will we know that we've been making progress towards it? And that's at maybe a business level. But if I think about that at an individual performance level, how often are we coaching our employees on a scorecard or at like a scattershot approach to, hey, on this interaction, Tom, you could have done this different for a customer. Hey, on this interaction, Tom, you could have done this with, how you were filing the notes on this, right? And it's scattered.
Yeah.
Versus saying, hey, Tom, over the next couple of weeks or months, let's focus on developing this one area of your skill. And all of the coaching, all of the time is invested on that, right? That type of intentional and frankly patient approach to development is how we drive sustainable results.
Yeah. And it almost goes back, a little bit goes back to your predictive versus reflective. Instead of me chewing you out for things you could have done better every single time in the past, I'm asking you to concentrate and work on the future for a better outcome for your performance and probably driving, in our field, customer experience. So yeah, I totally agree. So what about symptoms versus cause?
Oh, Tom, you asked that question, and I think we've got a minute to go, man.
Yep, about a minute or so.
This is a web, and this is when we think about defining the customer experience, and it's this idea of the sum of all interactions and how a customer feels about those interactions. You've got things that happen across all sorts of channels. You've got data that's structured and unstructured, and what I often see is that when we look at measuring these things, we don't actually ask why we're measuring it this way, or we don't have a clear idea of what the inputs are versus what the outputs are. And a very simple example is, the old comparison of, hey, we want issues resolved in this amount of time and they've got to reach this satisfaction rate, right? That's one versus the other, where they're at odds. Yeah. Oh, gosh, man, that was like a grenade you threw at me there. But ultimately, Tom, like,
Maybe we'll have to have you back for
cause versus effect.
And
gosh,
focus just on that, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll tell you what, like I love metrics. We talked about some of the events. I mean, that's a big focus on most of the sessions I do at conferences, is often around measuring performance. But frankly, Tom, I mean, you reached out and we had this conversation, and I'd make the same thing available to anybody. If you are actually in a place where you're trying to understand what you're measuring, or you feel like it's at odds, or you're not sure where to go, just reach out to me. I'm always happy to hop on the phone and just chat with people about this kind of stuff.
I might actually take you up on that, because I've worked in different organizations where they were some of the things they measured, I didn't understand why. And it really, and honestly, I don't have time to share the story now, but maybe we'll chat about it at a conference coming up, where I worked for an organization. We had this great metric, but in turn, the customer experience was, all you care about is that metric. You don't really care about helping me. And it was basically, how fast can you resolve a ticket, an incident, which is horrible if you reach that goal, but it does nothing but irritate the customer. So yeah,
I'm going to give you a super quick example if we can. I had a client who, so they deployed a new QA process as well as a new survey process, right? QA process was meant to measure if the agent did everything right. Survey process was meant to measure whether or not the customer is satisfied with the interaction. What they found after a few months of doing this is that the QA results were great. Agents were doing exactly what they were supposed to. QA results were through the tank. Like, they were awful. Buddy called me, said, hey, can we take a look at what was going on here? They were doing everything right from a QA standpoint. And they asked the customer, it was a 1-question survey, beautiful question. How satisfied were you with the results of your interaction today? And they were dissatisfied. I think you'll appreciate this. The particular line of business, their job was to call customers and tell them that they were denied for their mortgages.
Oh, geez.
They didn't even make the decision. Right. So when we think about, again, like, things that stick in my mind, a Maya Angelou quote, people will judge you by your actions, not your intentions. You may have a heart of gold, but so does a hard-boiled egg. Doesn't matter what your intentions are with CX, right? You've got to be really, really clear about what type of outcomes your actions are going to drive. Oh. And maybe that's where we...
Yeah, well, I tell you what,
I don't know.
I know, man. My producers are on. We got to get Justin back on another show. Maybe we can even do a live one from one of the conferences while we're in person.
Let's do it.
That'd be pretty cool. So, just moving on to closing, I'd like to thank everybody. Justin, thank you so much. I mean, I've personally learned a lot from you, and I can't wait to meet you in person, in the coming month or so when we get to meet up at one of these conferences, to maybe learn a lot more from you. And I'd like to thank the audience for showing up tonight. And remember, we're live on Twitch tonight, but we also upload this to YouTube and Twitch. You can follow us at #HDI Local. And by the way, if you're looking, now that we're getting into this post-COVID environment, a lot of our HDI Local chapters are starting to plan in-person events for the late summer and fall. And we mentioned a couple conferences coming up. Consider, checking us out at hdilocalchapters.org, finding a chapter near you and getting involved and learn what it's about. And it's because you get network and you meet great people like Justin. I mean, it's just great. So again, Justin, thank you so much. And I can't wait to meet up with you, in the future in person. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Excited to meet up with you as well.